Let's see. I had a preacher once who said there are three things important to learning. Repetition bears learning, repetition bears learning, repetition bears learning. So see if you can guess what I'm going to talk about, although from a different perspective here. I'm going to talk about our narrative. How did we lose the story of who we are as Republicans, who we are as conservatives, and why other people ought to join us, to include the group that Danielle's been talking about? How did we lose that story? Okay, first preview. We got to go back to it. What's our opponent's narrative? People are basically good until they're corrupted by wealth, history, tradition, religion, business, nationalism. Poor people are, and those closest to nature, like native peoples, they're the least corrupt and most deserving because corrupt rich people have stolen from them anyway. So it's only fair to redistribute wealth to the poor. At the same time, we break down all those traditional weapons that the rich are using, the military, the church, business, marriage, and so forth. We need a new elite to carry out this plan, but they're not corrupt even if they're wealthy and educated, think Al Gore, because they're carrying out the moral transfer of wealth and knowledge and power. If they can just destroy the old oppressive system, a new, fair, progressive system will naturally rise. That's what our opposition is teaching. So, of course, that's a pipe dream. Every time the liberals and progressives try to build on this kind of strategy, on this system of ideas, it comes to disaster. But it's a very attractive pitch. Our narrative actually works, and here it is. Man was given his right by God. At the same time, he has some responsibilities as people and as citizens. These rights and responsibilities are codified into behavior by the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and legitimate laws made in accordance with that standard. This system is fair and just, although there are shortcomings from time to time, and when we find them, we correct them in accordance with established representative procedures, new laws, amendments to the Constitution. We have to be alert to bad behavior, internationally and domestically, because people aren't necessarily good, regardless of their economic standing. And we have to be aware of the misuse of power, even on our own side, especially misuse of power toward the weaker members of our society. So we need checks and balances and limitations on the collection of power. I'm trying to remember who it was that said, every time I see a collection of power, I want to take out my hammer. When you use this set of ideas as the platform to build your strategy and your laws and your outreach to other people, then you encourage initiative and you maximize freedom and you get a healthy, growing society. Opportunity is what we want to offer in a way that people can believe and trust us that it's actually there. So much for the narrative piece. Now, where do we go wrong? Briefly, geez, this could go all night, huh? Let me just suggest a couple of points. After World War II, we used this conservative narrative as a basis for the Marshall Plan. We saved Europe. We rebuilt their economies. We brought them into the future. We repelled the attraction of communism. Where did we not use the Marshall Plan? Inside the United States. We didn't apply that here. We did not use what our forefathers used these ideas to look forward. They built the constitutional principles to build the new country. Our temptation has been to use those constitutional principles to look backwards to what we want to save. We need to be using those as conservatives to craft the future. So, what happens? The people with the other narrative, they send their children and their most passionate people into law, teaching, media, and politics. We send our children into business, law enforcement, and the military. We secure the nation. They took control of it. In the 1950s, social conservatives aligned with business to oppose the creeping seizure of property and increased taxes and destruction of tradition, all those things that we thought FDR was bringing about. And as big business exploded and became international, we kept that alignment. And so we found ourselves 40, 50 years later aligned with big businesses who are moving jobs overseas, and we're trying to explain why it's okay for us, because eventually a job might come back here. We can't do that. The purpose of our principles are to benefit our people, not to benefit some other people. And if we've been aligned with somebody and their behavior no longer supports these principles, then we need to look at severing that alignment and explaining to the world why. For 40 years, a vocal and well-organized community of believers on the left have pushed their leaders further and further left, while leaders on the right resisted the conservative push from their voters at home on anything but tax reduction. That's all they wanted to talk about. In a few cases where conservatives triumphed, Goldwater, Reagan, the institutional elite in our party still resisted conservatives at the grassroots. And eventually, they just outlasted us. So and lastly, I'd suggest we've been too embarrassed to restate our faith in God and to argue it's an essential element of American exceptionalism. I don't think that we need a tent revival at every Republican meeting. But for heaven's sakes, the Democratic National Committee booed God, and we didn't use it in a country that's 80% Christian. What in the world are we thinking? We're thinking with an elite that does not represent or reflect those fundamental values and narrative of conservatives. So let me just say, that's my take, how we lose our conservative narrative. We didn't teach it. We didn't live with it. We didn't use it. Now a lot of conservatives can't even remember it. We got to remember it. We got to act on it. We got to act on it and outreach to other communities if it's not too late.